Museum core uses a function to load all the styles and scripts that makes use of WP register style, WP register script, WP enqueue style, and WP enqueue script. It hooks into the WP enqueue scripts action hook to fire all these style and script enqueue functions when other styles and scripts are being triggered in the WordPress execution. Along the way, a bunch of other WordPress and theme-specific functions are used to pull in various pieces of data. I'll walk you through the entire function so you can see what it's doing at each step. The function starts off with an isAdmin check. IsAdmin simply returns true if you're currently in the WordPress admin and false if you aren't. We don't want any of these scripts and styles to be loaded if we are in the WordPress admin, so I'm making sure it's only fired on the front end with a not isAdmin check. WordPress uses a number of different global variables throughout the code. We can use these globals too to benefit from the data they return. In this case, I'm using one of a bunch of globals that return browser-specific information. These globals return Boolean values based on whether the browser is currently in use. I'm loading a Font Awesome icon font later, and Font Awesome 3 has some IE-specific styles it adds, so I'm pulling in the isIE global variable here so I can use it later when I get to enqueuing that style sheet. WP getTheme is the replacement function for the older, now deprecated function getThemeData. They do essentially the same thing, return information about the currently active theme. Optionally, you can pass the directory name for the style sheet for WP getTheme to look in if you want to get theme data about a theme that is not the active theme. And if you have the theme in some non-standard location, you can use another parameter to define the theme's root directory. This function returns the instance of the WP theme object, which returns an array of data about the theme, mostly grabbed from the style.css's header. Things like the theme name, author name, URI, description, language file information, etc. I'm using it to grab the theme's version, which I use later. AP core getThemeDefaults is the first theme-specific helper function, and this just returns an array of default settings. I use this in case any of the options are not set, because the next function I use is getOption. GetOption is how you fetch data from the WP Options database table if your options were stored using the WordPress Settings API. Each option has a named key, in this case, AP Core Theme Options, and I'm loading all the stored options into a variable named Options. The first usage of this variable is on the next line, where I check to see if a font subset was saved. The only time it wouldn't get saved with the other theme options is if someone just installed the theme or if they just upgraded from a version before that feature was added. If the subset isn't defined in the options table, I use the default subset, Latin, from the defaults array. Otherwise, I use the one that's been set, which would also be Latin unless otherwise specified. Now I start enqueuing things. You'll see me do this two different ways. The first is just to enqueue jQuery. jQuery is built into WordPress core, so all I need to do is say enqueue jQuery, and since it's already registered, I don't need to do anything else. Then I enqueue Bootstrap. Bootstrap isn't in core, so I need to give WordPress some information about where the files are and if there are any dependencies. For this, I'm using all 5 of the available parameters for WP enqueue script. The first parameter is the name of the script I'm enqueuing. jQuery is registered as jQuery, so that's how I need to load it. If I wanted to load my own private version of jQuery, which is not recommended by the way, I could name it something else like my jQuery. And then I would need to pass all the information about where the file is, like I'm doing for Bootstrap here. The second parameter is where the file is located, so I'm using getTemplateDirectory-URI to pull in the theme's directory. This works because if a child theme is written based off of core, it won't be looking in that child's theme directory for Bootstrap like it would if I used getStyleSheetDirectory-URI. Then I'm just pointing it to the path of the minified.js file in the assets folder. The next parameter is dependencies. WordPress expects this to be an array, so even though I'm only passing one value, it still needs to be inside of an array. Bootstrap requires jQuery, so I need to make sure that jQuery is loaded before trying to load Bootstrap. This can be set to false or just an empty array if no dependencies exist. The fourth parameter is version. I'm using the 3.0 version of Bootstrap, so I'm just manually setting that here. The last parameter is a Boolean option determining whether to load this file in the footer. This only applies to WP-enqueue script, even though it's almost identical in all other ways to WP-enqueue style. I'm setting this to true since it's not required that Bootstrap be loaded in the header for any reason. Next, I'm loading the CSS for Bootstrap, and I'm doing that with WP-enqueue style. As mentioned before, WP-enqueue style is almost identical to WP-enqueue script, so this looks very similar to the line directly above it. I define a handle for my style, I pass the location, again using getTemplateDirectory URI, and then passing the location of the minified CSS file in the assets directory. I have no dependencies for the style sheet, so that gets set to false, and I set the version to 3.0.0. WP-enqueue style has an optional last parameter which is unique to WP-enqueue style, which is the media setting in the link call. This determines on what devices or screen types the style sheet should be loaded and defaults to all. This can be set to any accepted media value like print or screen. The next script I'm loading uses WP register script first. WP register script takes all the same parameters of WP-enqueue script, but it doesn't actually enqueue the script. It just saves the information and waits for a WP-enqueue script call using the handle defined in the first parameter to be used before enqueuing the script. WP register style is exactly the same. It mirrors WP-enqueue style, except that it doesn't actually enqueue the style sheet. In this case, I'm using offsite location values for the style sheets. I'm loading them from Google Fonts rather than from within the theme, letting their servers take the load for the HTTP request rather than the server hosting the theme. I'm deliberately registering these before enqueuing them because I don't actually want to enqueue all these font style sheets. And even though with Google Web Fonts you can combine them into one CSS path, I'm registering them separately so I can individually check to see which one is active and enqueue only that. Then I go back and use my options variable to load all the saved fonts into an array and check to see which ones are in that array. If the font is in the array, it gets enqueued. Otherwise, we move on to the next font. After loading the Google fonts, I load my icon font, FontAwesome, which is enqueued with WP-enqueue style. I could probably have set Bootstrap as a dependency for FontAwesome, but it's sort of irrelevant since Bootstrap is already being loaded and it's not explicitly required that Bootstrap be present to use FontAwesome. Then I finally get to that is.ie global that I pulled in at the beginning to do an Internet Explorer check. If Internet Explorer is detected, I let FontAwesome's IE style sheet deal with those conditions. Finally, I get to load my theme style sheet, so I'm using getStyleSheetURI to get the direct path of the style sheet. In a child theme, this will get the path of the child theme's style sheet. There are no dependencies for my style sheet, though again, technically Bootstrap could be listed here, and I'm using the theme version from the WP getTheme function I loaded earlier into the theme variable to handle the version. Last, if we're on a single poster page, comments are open, and the option for threaded comments is set, we're going to load this WordPress core comment reply script. After I'm done, I hook the whole thing to WP-enqueue scripts, and then I don't need to worry about adding any of that stuff to the theme's header.php.